What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors gets disrespected on live television? In just 34 seconds, Samuel L. Jackson went from guest to legend as he completely destroyed Bill Maher's credibility on his own show, leading to the most explosive walkout in talk show history. What started as a conversation about representation in Hollywood turned into an all-out war that exposed everything wrong with how certain hosts treat their guests. Before we get into this absolute chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We drop daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Last night on Real Time, what should have been a celebration of Samuel L. Jackson's incredible career turned into something nobody saw coming. The legendary actor, known for his powerful performances and even more powerful presence, walked onto that stage with his usual confidence. Bill Maher greeted him with a handshake and a smile, but anyone watching closely could see something was already off in Maher's energy. They sat down, and Maher started with what seemed like normal talk show banter. "Sam, great to have you here. You've been in what, like 1,000 movies at this point?" Jackson smiled, playing along. "Not quite 1,000, Bill, but I've been blessed to work consistently for decades." Right, Maher said, leaning back in his chair with that smirk he always has. "You've played everything. Superheroes, criminals, Jedis, but let's talk about something real. This whole diversity thing in Hollywood. Don't you think it's gotten a bit out of hand?" You could see Jackson's face change immediately. His smile didn't exactly disappear, but it definitely shifted into something else. Something more serious. "Out of hand? What do you mean by that, Bill?" Maher waved his hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. "Come on. You know what I mean. Every movie now has to check boxes. It's like they're casting people based on a checklist instead of talent." Jackson sat forward, his voice getting that edge that anyone who's seen his movies knows means business. "Hold up. Are you suggesting that actors of color are being cast because of checklists and not because of talent?" "I'm not saying that exactly," Maher said, though his tone suggested he was saying exactly that. "I'm saying the pendulum has swung too far. There's this overcorrection happening." "Overcorrection," Jackson repeated slowly, like he was tasting something bitter. "Bill, let me tell you something about overcorrection. For decades, for generations, the only correction was that people who looked like me didn't get opportunities. Period. We weren't in the room. We weren't being considered. So now that doors are opening, you're calling it overcorrection?" The audience started murmuring. Some people clapped. Maher looked irritated that the crowd wasn't on his side. "I'm just saying what a lot of people are thinking but are afraid to say because of this woke culture that attacks anyone who questions the narrative." "Woke culture," Jackson said, shaking his head. "Man, that's really the word you're going with right now? On national television? With me sitting right here?" Maher leaned forward, clearly thinking he was making some brilliant point. "Yes, woke culture. This idea that we can't have honest conversations anymore without someone getting offended. I've built my career on saying what others won't say." "No, Bill," Jackson interrupted, his voice getting louder. "You've built your career on saying controversial things for attention. There's a difference between having honest conversations and just being disrespectful under the disguise of being edgy." The tension in the studio was thick now. You could feel it through the screen. Maher's face was getting red, and he clearly didn't like being challenged on his own show. "I don't think I'm being disrespectful. I think I'm being honest. And honestly, Sam, don't you ever look at some of these casting choices and think, maybe they hired that person just because of diversity quotas?" Jackson's jaw clenched. "Every single day when I go to work, I prove my talent. Every single day. You're sitting here suggesting that my colleagues, my friends, people I've worked with, got their jobs because someone needed to fill a quota. That's insulting as hell, Bill." "I didn't say you specifically." Maher tried to backtrack, but Jackson wasn't having it. "But you're implying it about someone. About people in this industry who work their asses off. And you're doing it while sitting in your comfortable chair on your comfortable show, talking down about things you clearly don't understand." Maher's face went from red to almost purple. "I don't understand. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I think I understand plenty." "Understanding and experiencing are two different things," Jackson shot back. "You've been in this industry for 30 years as someone who's never had to worry about whether your skin color would keep you from getting a role. You've never had to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. So no, Bill, you don't understand." "Not really." The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real, This was uncomfortable, and it was necessary. Maher tried to regain control, his voice taking on that condescending tone he uses when he thinks he's educating someone. Look, all I'm trying to say is that maybe, just maybe, we should hire people based purely on merit and not worry about what they look like. Jackson laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they can't believe what they're hearing. Merit. You want to talk about merit? Bill, I've been nominated for awards. I've broken box office records. I've done Shakespeare and action movies and everything in between. My merit speaks for itself. And yet, here you are, questioning whether diversity in casting is about merit or quotas. You see the problem with that? I'm asking legitimate questions, Maher insisted, his voice rising. Questions that a lot of Americans are wondering about. No, you're hiding behind questions to say what you really think without taking responsibility for it, Jackson countered. That's a coward's way of having a conversation. If you believe something, say it. Don't dress it up as just asking questions. Maher stood up from his chair, clearly agitated. I am saying it. I'm saying that this forced diversity is creating division instead of unity. Is that clear enough for you? Jackson stood up too, and suddenly the dynamic of the entire show shifted. Here was Samuel L. Jackson, one of the most commanding presences in Hollywood, standing toe-to-toe with a talk show host who was used to being the smartest guy in the room. Forced diversity. Man, you really said forced diversity. Let me tell you what was forced, Bill. What was forced was decades of exclusion. What was forced was talented actors, writers, directors being kept out because of the color of their skin. What's happening now isn't forced. It's just fair. Finally, the studio audience erupted in applause, and you could see Maher getting more frustrated. He hated that he was losing the room. So we're just supposed to ignore merit now? Just cast anyone as long as they check the right identity boxes? You keep using that word, merit, like it's some objective thing that's always been applied fairly, Jackson said, his voice full of controlled anger. Merit is what got me here. Merit is what got every person of color in this industry here. We had to have merit, and then some. What you're really upset about is that the playing field is getting leveled, and you don't like it because it means your comfortable assumptions about how things should be are being challenged. Maher pointed his finger at Jackson, a gesture that felt aggressive and disrespectful. Don't tell me what I'm upset about. You don't know me. I know what you're saying right now, Jackson fired back. And what you're saying is the same tired nonsense that people have been using to justify inequality for decades. Dress it up however you want. Call it honest conversation, or asking questions, or whatever makes you feel better. But at the end of the day, you're arguing against progress. Progress, Maher scoffed. Is it progress when talent takes a backseat to identity politics? That was it. That was the moment things went past the point of no return. You could see it in Jackson's eyes. He was done. Completely done. Identity politics, Jackson repeated, his voice dangerously quiet now. Bill, my identity isn't politics. My existence isn't politics. The fact that I'm standing here having to defend the right for people who look like me to have equal opportunities in this industry, that's not politics. That's basic human dignity. And if you can't see the difference, then this conversation is over. Maher sensed he was losing but couldn't help himself. He had to get the last word in. Oh, so now you're going to storm off because I challenged your worldview. That's mature. No, Jackson said, his voice steady and powerful. I'm going to leave because you've disrespected me. You've disrespected my colleagues. And you've shown that you invited me here not for a real conversation but so you could use me as a prop to make whatever point you wanted to make about diversity. I'm nobody's prop, Bill. The audience was going wild now, clapping and cheering. Maher looked around, clearly shocked that his own audience was turning on him. I invited you here as a guest, as someone I respect. If you respected me, you wouldn't have ambushed me with this nonsense, Jackson said, pulling off his microphone. If you respected the work that people of color do in this industry, you wouldn't question whether we deserve to be here. And if you had any sense at all, you'd realize that the reason your audience is clapping right now is because they see through exactly what you're doing. Maher's face was a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He tried to laugh it off. That nervous laugh he does when things aren't going his way. Come on, Sam. Sit back down. Let's talk about this like adults. Like adults, Jackson repeated. Bill, adults don't invite someone onto their show and then spend the entire time insulting their intelligence and their community. Adults don't hide behind just asking questions when they're really just pushing an agenda. And adults definitely don't point their finger in someone's face when they're losing an argument. The production staff was scrambling now. You could see people in the background moving around, unsure whether to go to commercial or let this play out. Maher looked at his producers, then back at Jackson, trying to figure out how to salvage this disaster. "I think you're taking this too personally," Maher said, which was possibly the worst thing he could have said in that moment. Jackson's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Too personally? Bill, you questioned the merit of an entire group of people, suggested that their achievements are because of quotas rather than talent, and then told me I'm taking it too personally? Do you hear yourself? I'm talking about a systemic issue in Hollywood," Maher tried to explain, his voice getting defensive. "It's not about you specifically, but it is about people like me," Jackson said. "Every time you question diversity, you're questioning people like me. Every time you suggest that casting is based on checklists, you're suggesting that people like me don't earn our roles. You can't separate the issue from the people it affects. That's the problem with people like you, Bill. You want to have these big philosophical debates about diversity and representation, but you forget that you're talking about real people's lives and careers." The audience was completely on Jackson's side now. Someone shouted, "Tell him, Sam!" and others joined in with supportive cheers. Maher looked like he wanted to disappear. "This is my show," Maher said weakly, trying to assert some kind of authority. "I set the topics, I ask the questions, and I have the right to walk out when those questions are disrespectful and ignorant," Jackson said simply. "You can have your show, Bill. You can keep asking your controversial questions, but you're going to do it without me." Maher made one last desperate attempt to keep control. "If you leave now, you're just proving that you can't handle a different opinion." Jackson stopped and turned back, and the look on his face was something nobody who watched will ever forget. "No, Bill, what I can't handle is disrespect, disguised as discourse. What I can't handle is being used as a token guest, so you can air your problematic views and hide behind the excuse of having a diverse guest on your show. What I can't handle is sitting here while you diminish the achievements of an entire community of talented artists. So yeah, I'm leaving. Not because I can't handle a different opinion, but because I respect myself too much to sit here and be insulted." The whole studio was standing now, applauding. Even some of the crew members were clapping. Maher stood there, his face a mixture of shock, anger, and humiliation, watching one of the biggest stars in Hollywood walk away from his show. "You're making a mistake," Maher called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Walking out doesn't solve anything." Jackson paused at the edge of the stage, his hand on the curtain. He turned one last time, and his voice was calm but firm. "The mistake was accepting your invitation in the first place. The mistake was thinking you actually wanted to have a real conversation instead of just stirring up controversy for ratings. And the biggest mistake would be staying here one more second while you continued to disrespect everything I stand for." "I didn't disrespect you," Maher protested, but his voice was drowned out by the audience's continued applause. "Yes, Bill, you did," Jackson said. "You disrespected me the moment you suggested that diversity in Hollywood is somehow a problem instead of progress. You disrespected me when you implied that actors of color are being hired to fill quotas rather than because of their immense talent. And you disrespected me when you thought I would just sit here and nod along while you said these things." Maher tried to speak again, but Jackson held up his hand. "I'm done, man. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this show. And I'm done giving you the benefit of the doubt. You can explain to your audience why I left, but we both know the real reason. It's because you couldn't handle someone calling out your BS on your own show." The tension was electric. The audience was going absolutely crazy, cheering and clapping. Some people were recording on their phones, capturing this historic moment. Maher's face had gone pale, and he looked around desperately for support that wasn't coming. "Sam, please," Maher said, and there was something almost pathetic in his voice now. "Let's just talk about something else. We can move on from this." "Move on?" Jackson's voice was incredulous. "Bill, you can't just say disrespectful things, and then say let's move on when you get called out. That's not how this works. You don't get to insult people and then act surprised when they won't stick around for more." The producers were definitely signaling to go to commercial now, but nobody was listening. This moment was too real, too raw, too important to interrupt. Jackson shook his head slowly, disappointment written all over his face. "You know what's really sad about this, Bill? You had an opportunity here. You had one of the most successful actors in Hollywood on your show. someone who's lived through decades of change in this industry, someone who could have given you real insight into why representation matters. But instead, you wanted to score cheap points by being controversial. You wanted to be the guy who isn't afraid to challenge diversity. Well, congratulations, you challenged it. And you lost. I didn't lose anything, Maher said defensively, but his voice had no conviction. You lost your credibility, Jackson said flatly. You lost the respect of your audience, if the applause is any indication. And you lost a guest who came here in good faith, thinking this would be a real conversation. That's what you lost tonight, Bill. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked defeated, standing there on his own stage, watching his show fall apart. Jackson adjusted his jacket, straightening it with dignity. I've been in this business a long time, and I've dealt with a lot of things. I've dealt with racism. I've dealt with typecasting. I've dealt with every obstacle you can imagine. But I've never let anyone make me feel like I don't deserve to be where I am. And I'm damn sure not going to start now. Especially not on a talk show that's more interested in controversy than truth. The audience's applause grew even louder. Someone yelled, "We love you, Sam!" And Jackson gave a small nod of acknowledgement. This industry has problems, Bill, Jackson continued. Real problems. Problems with representation. Problems with pay equity. Problems with opportunities. But people like you aren't interested in actually solving those problems. You're interested in using them as talking points to get attention. You want to be seen as the brave truth teller, but you're not telling any truths. You're just repeating the same tired arguments that have been used to keep people out for decades. Maher finally found his voice again. That's not fair. I've supported progressive causes my entire career. Supporting causes and understanding them are two different things, Jackson said sharply. You can write checks and show up to events, but if you don't actually get it, if you don't actually understand why representation matters, and why diversity is important, then you're just performative. And tonight, you showed everyone watching exactly how performative you really are. The words hung in the air like a judge's verdict. Maher looked stunned, like he'd been slapped. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Jackson took a deep breath, his voice getting quieter, but somehow even more powerful. I came here tonight to talk about my work, to talk about my career, to maybe inspire some young people watching who dream of being in this industry. Instead, I had to defend my entire community's right to exist in this space. That's exhausting, Bill. And it's insulting. And I'm not doing it anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again on this show. So that's it? Maher said. And there was anger creeping back into his voice. You're just going to walk away? That's it, Jackson confirmed. I'm going to walk away with my dignity intact, which is more than I can say for this show right now. The audience erupted again. The energy in that room was incredible, like everyone witnessing something they knew would be talked about for years. This wasn't just a celebrity spat. This was a moment of accountability, happening live on television. Maher made one final attempt, his voice rising with frustration. You know what? Fine. Walk away. Run away from a real conversation because you can't handle someone disagreeing with you. Jackson stopped and turned slowly, and everyone in that studio held their breath. When he spoke, his voice was ice cold. Bill, I've been having real conversations about race and representation since before you had a talk show. I've had conversations with directors who didn't want to cast me. I've had conversations with studio executives who thought I wasn't bankable. I've had conversations with people who used words a hell of a lot worse than what you said tonight. So don't you dare tell me I can't handle a conversation. What I can't handle is someone wasting my time with the same ignorant talking points that have been debunked 1,000 times. That's not a conversation. That's just you showing off your privilege. Privilege, Maher sputtered. Now we're talking about privilege. We've been talking about privilege this whole time, Jackson said. That's what this entire argument has been about. Your privilege to question whether people of color deserve their jobs. Your privilege to treat diversity as a debate topic instead of a moral imperative. Your privilege to sit here and play devil's advocate with people's lives and careers. That's privilege, Bill. And tonight, you showed all of it. The studio was absolutely roaring now. People were on their feet, cheering, some of them crying. This was more than entertainment. This was catharsis. This was someone finally saying what needed to be said. Jackson looked around the studio one last time, making eye contact with audience members, with crew members, with anyone who would meet his gaze. Then he looked back at Maher, who stood there looking smaller somehow, diminished. "I hope you think about this," Jackson said, his voice softer now but still firm. "I hope you really think about what happened here tonight. Because this isn't about you and me. This is about a bigger issue. This is about respect. This is about recognizing that when you invite someone onto your show, you treat them with dignity, regardless of what topics you want to discuss. And you definitely don't ambush them with thinly veiled racism disguised as intellectual discourse." "I am not a racist," Maher said quickly, defensively. "I didn't call you a racist," Jackson responded. "But what you said tonight, those arguments you made, they come from the same place. They come from a place that sees diversity as a threat instead of a strength. They come from a place that questions whether people of color truly earn their success. And whether you want to admit it or not, that's problematic as hell." Maher had no response to that. He just stood there, his show in ruins around him, watching as one of Hollywood's biggest legends prepared to walk off his stage. Jackson took one step back, then another. And with each step, the audience's applause grew louder. He didn't rush. He didn't storm off in anger. He walked with dignity, with purpose, with the confidence of someone who knew he had done the right thing. "Good luck with the rest of your show, Bill," Jackson said, and there was no sarcasm in his voice, just finality. "I hope you find a guest who's willing to sit here and be disrespected for ratings. Because that's not me. That's never been me. And that's never going to be me." And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the stage of Real Time with Bill Maher, leaving behind a stunned host, a cheering audience, and a moment that would be replayed and discussed for days, weeks, months to come. The cameras caught every second of his exit, the dignity in his walk, the strength in his posture, the absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. Maher stood alone on his stage, the applause for Jackson drowning out anything he might have wanted to say. His show, his platform, his moment of control, all of it had crumbled in less than an hour. And it had crumbled because he had underestimated the man sitting across from him. He had thought he could challenge Samuel L. Jackson and win. He had thought wrong. As Jackson disappeared behind the curtain, the audience continued their standing ovation. Some people were chanting his name. Others were recording, making sure this moment would live forever on social media. And through it all, Bill Maher stood at his desk, a man who had just learned a very expensive lesson about respect, dignity, and the consequences of using real people's struggles as fodder for entertainment. The last image before the show cut to commercial was telling. Jackson's empty chair, Maher's pale face, and an audience that had witnessed something far more real than any scripted controversy could ever be. This was the moment when a legend stood up for himself and his community, refused to be used as a prop, and walked away with his head held high. This was the moment when a talk show host discovered that not everyone would tolerate his brand of provocation. This was the moment that would define both of their legacies in ways neither of them could have anticipated when the show began. Samuel L. Jackson walked off that stage, and in doing so, he walked into history. The exit wasn't just about him. It was about every actor, every artist, every person of color who had ever been questioned about whether they truly deserved their success. It was about standing up to casual disrespect disguised as intellectual curiosity. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it, no matter how big the platform or how bright the lights. The show went to commercial, but the impact of what had just happened would reverberate far beyond that studio, beyond that night, beyond anything Bill Maher could have imagined when he thought it would be a good idea to challenge one of Hollywood's most respected figures on the topic of diversity and merit. He had wanted controversy. He had gotten accountability. And the difference between the two had never been more clear.